It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Let's get out of here. Aye. Hey everybody, it's Aaron from Got a Minute, and we're going to talk again about Antiochus Epiphanes because this is a big deal. And here's our chart. My chart's getting a little bit busy here, but we're going to just try our best here to explain something. Antiochus Epiphanes is so important for us to understand Daniel 9:27 and understand the whole timeline. So here's the 7,000 year plan. Again, we're always speculating. I always have to remind people we're speculating, but this looks amazing. This looks really good. Looks very clean. Antiochus Epiphanes showed up, and this is here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. He did his thing. He did his abomination of desolation somewhere in the ballpark of 165, 167 BC, in that ballpark, okay? A few hundred years before Jesus came on the scene, right in the middle. But you need to make a note here. This is basically right in the middle of the whole creation 7,000 year plan here. The end of the millennial reign, if he's going to come back in 2030, would be somewhere in the ballpark of 3030. I ran out of room, so I went up here. Here's another thing too. Let me pause on the Antiochus and go over here for a second. We were talking about 490 year cycles. Again, in Matthew 18, Jesus says 70 times 7. That's 490. We also have a 490 in Daniel chapter 9, talking about 70 weeks. 490 is extremely significant. If the land was divided in 1401, 7 years after crossing the Jordan, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cycles back from 2030. It's perfect. But here, look at this cool thing. You add another 490 years. It gets you to 2520. Oh my goodness. Does that sound familiar? All you rapture head people that understand what 7 prophetic years is, that's 2,520 days. And so here we have the next 490 year cycle is 2520. Another 490 is 3010, which is what I believe to be 20 years before the millennial reign. I've got some thoughts and theories in the last 20 years and what's going to happen, but I'm not going to mention it in that video. All I'm trying to say is 490 year cycle is after 2030. But here was the highlight of this video, the Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes does his abomination of desolation in the center of God's story. That's the main part of what I'm saying. So being very, very broad here, if we have a 7,000 year window, he did his thing somewhere after 3,500 years since the fall of Adam, more or less. Antiochus Epiphanes is right in the middle of the Old Testament and the New Testament. In fact, Malachi, according to this Bible right here, was written in and around this time. So, and that was apparently the last book written in the Bible. So after this, there wasn't much going on in terms of biblical books being written. So Antiochus Epiphanes is sandwiched between the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's right in the center of God's story. This is so important for us to understand it. But you're not going to understand Daniel 9:27 unless you understand who Antiochus Epiphanes is. Antiochus Epiphanes is talked about in Daniel chapter 8, and Antiochus Epiphanes IV is also talked about in Daniel 11. Okay? So, if you do not know if you don't know who Antiochus Epiphanes is, it's time you learn. And so, let's just read a little bit of the book of Maccabees. Yes, I know Maccabees is not in our canon, but just like anything else in history, sometimes we need to go to other books to learn what the story was. I'm not going to read all these things, but I'm just going to hop around just a little. It's very easy. It'll take you real quick to read through the book of Maccabees. But here we go. For these there grew a sinful offshoot, Antiochus Epiphanes. This is 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 10. Son of the king Antiochus, once a hostage in Rome, he became king in the 137th year. According to this Bible, that means 175 BC. And then in the 143rd year, what happens is, once Antiochus had seen his authority established, he determined to make himself king of Egypt and the ruler of both kingdoms. So he's trying to be king over many kingdoms, and that's what Daniel 9:27. He's trying to make a covenant with many. Well, let's read that. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wings of abomination shall be the one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. So according to this timeline in the book of Maccabees, it kind of all falls into all this, because basically he becomes king, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's when he starts to take over Egypt, and then he does the abomination a couple years later, and then Maccabees come back and take over the temple, which he destroyed. It's like a perfect blueprint of what's going to happen in our timeline. So this story is written in Daniel 8 and Daniel 11, and Daniel 9 is sandwiched between Daniel 8 and 11. You guys are kind of understanding here what's going on. So after he takes Egypt, the story goes on and on and on. The days passed, and after 2 years, the king sent I don't know how to say this, Maisharsh, through the cities of Judah. He came to Jerusalem with an impressive force, addressing with what appeared to be peaceful words. What appeared to be peaceful words. He gained confidence, but then suddenly he fell on the city, dealing it in a terrible blow and destroying many of the people of Israel. He pillaged the city. On it goes. He basically started to become a bad guy. And then what happens? After he's a real bad guy, many of these people, that is, every apostate from the law, rallied to them and so committed evil in the country, forcing Israel into hiding in their places of refuge. On the 15th day of Kislev in the year 145, the king erected the abomination of desolation. The king erected the abomination of desolation. The king erected the abomination of desolation. And on the wings of abomination shall be one who makes desolate. Okay, so there we go. Basically, we got a lot of action here. And so going on here, above the altar, and altars were built in the surrounding towns of Judah, and incense offered at the doors of the house and in the streets. Any book of the law that came to light were torn up and burned whenever anyone was discovered possessing a copy of the covenant, or practicing the law. The king's decree sentenced him to death. Having might on their side, they took action month after against any offenders they discovered in the town of Israel. On the 25th day of the month, sacrifice was offered on the altar erected over the altar of Holocaust. Women who had their children circumcised were put to death according to the edict, with their babies hung around their necks. Oh boy. Oh my goodness. And the members of the household and those who had performed their circumcision were executed with them. And then skip over to Maccabees. So that was all in First Maccabees chapter 1. This is an easy study. It's a fast read. Skip over to a couple chapters to First Maccabees chapter 4. It says down here in verse 54. Let me see if I can get this in the frame here. On the 25th day of the 9th month, Kislev, in the year 148, they rose at dawn. So this is when they came back and basically took over the temple again and made it in right standing with God. So this story is exactly the story of what the Antichrist is going to do at the end of the tribulation. The timeline that I just presented is more or less the same timeline that's going to happen. Not only is this story such a pivotal story to understand what's happening in Daniel's last 70th, the 70th week of Daniel, it's presented in the center of God's 7,000-year plan, right in the middle. It's so clear. Right in the middle of God's 7,000-year plan, Antiochus is doing his thing. And so at the end of our timeline here, we're thinking that's going to happen real soon, this 70th week, we have this other type Antiochus that's going to, do what, basically put a statue up and say, worship me or worship this God, etc., abomination of desolation. Let me get another screenshot and come back to you here. Yep, and here is a screenshot of what Antiochus Epiphanes means. It means manifested from God. Epiphanes means that. And then Epiphanes, which is what they would secretly kind of call him, which was meant the madman. So basically anti-God. Antiochus, anti-God. And Antiochus Epiphanes, manifested from God. And this is right in the center of our storyline. So please take your time and learn about Antiochus Epiphanes IV. I will link a video that I shared a long time ago in the description box below. I will link 3 videos that I talked about on my live stream a little while ago. And I'm sure there's tons of other content that you can dig up on Antiochus Epiphanes IV. But you're not going to understand Daniel 9:27 if you do not know the history of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. And so, again, it's at the center of God's 7,000-year plan. It's a very significant story. Please have some fun and explore more on this, and you will be happy you did. I think we were very close. I hope it's happening this year, the rapture of the church. If you are not in a relationship with Jesus Christ, this is a very good reason to do so. I think that it's going to get bad pretty soon, and in order to escape this craziness, basically you need to get into a relationship with Jesus Christ as soon as possible. Love you very much. See you in the clouds. One day closer. Go, Jesus, go.